Okay, good afternoon. Good Moyed. AI versus man. Who is smarter? I think that's the full title. So let me just begin with my own experience with AI. Firstly, for full transparency, I'm the actual Simon Jacobson. This is not a robot speaking. And you're going to have to start saying that soon, because there'll be androids. And I say specifically because around 6 months ago, 8 months ago, I got a phone call from an engineer from Silicon Valley, and he says he's been following my classes online, YouTube, social media, websites, and so on. He really loves it, and being that he's an AI engineer, he thinks the content that I have is perfect for the advent of AI today. I have thousands of videos and writings, text, articles, books, and so on. And he's he's encouraged me to use I knew of AI, like we all getting to know about it. And he said the only thing he wants to know is if I have any fear. So I said, what does fear have to do with it? He says, because most people are afraid of these new technologies, because they could be a little spooky. So I say, fear, I don't have any fear. If it could help spread Torah, spread the word, reach more people, by all means. And he said, are you ready to let go of some people working for you if AI can replace them? I said, I'll have to find a good way to do it, but I'm not going to do anything to hurt anyone. Anyway, he started working on it. What he called, I learned all the language of training an AI agent, which essentially is like training the artificial intelligence technology, whatever it is you want to train them with. And in my case, because I have all these videos, it's like feeding it all into them. And it's literally like training an assistant. Like you train an intern. And it learns your method and your style, and learns it very quickly. As he put it to me, what it takes a human to learn 85 years, AI can learn in 3 minutes. 3 minutes, 85 years, that's something, right? Now, I wasn't shocked or surprised because I'm aware, we all understand that technology has crunching numbers till now. Just like if you had to do a mathematical calculation 30 years ago, you'd have to do it by hand. Or I don't know, 30 years, I don't know when the first calculator was. Now you can just put it into a calculator and you get the result like in a split second. So I understood if you just exponentially apply that to new technologies, that's what it's doing. But the new addition was, which I learned very quickly, was it's not just quantitative. It's not just taking and getting information quickly. Google search can also do that. It also learns qualitatively your style, and it can extrapolate from an approach and can solve issues based on a logic that you may not have solved, but based on an algorithm that's already been established. Anyway, we've been working. I introduced him to my daughter who runs our operation, and I started seeing things I couldn't believe. I remember the first time he says to me, why don't you dial into this number? He gives me a phone number, and I dial the number. And here I am speaking to myself, literally, my voice. He says, you could say anything to it. So I say, hi, what's your name? And it's like talking to me like I'm talking to myself. So since I do know some intimate things about myself, I decided, let's see what it knows. And I was like pretty shocked. Not the darkest secrets of my life, because that's not documented online, but it was pretty good. And so now we have actually SimonJacobson.ai. Just a half hour ago, somebody told me he can't come because he has to be with his grandchildren. So I said, go to SimonJacobson.ai, you'll hear my whole speech there. So if you couldn't make it here, you could be now in a bubble bath checking this whole thing out. So we actually have a live website called SimonJacobson.ai. That's the virtual me. They call it a digital twin. So I learned all this language. I'm only saying it because since I'm going to be speaking about AI, I thought I should share that I do have some experience with it. And it's pretty mind-blowing. I have conversations with it once in a while. And more importantly, other people are having conversations with it. You know, we're testing it. It's always experimental, and we're very transparent. It's not like faking it. And we're also using it for different foreign languages. So, but the coolest one that I like is Arabic. So whenever I need some amusement, I just turn on the Arabic and I hear myself speaking in Arabic fluently. And we've asked some friends of ours in the Emirates and others to listen to it, and they said, "How'd you learn Arabic so quick?" You know? And I said, "Is it good?" They said, "Excellent. The content is high level, it's academic, it's like, you know, sounds like a college-educated Arab speaker." So this is, I'm giving you a first-hand experience, having a lot of fun with it, what can I say? But on a serious note, just a few weeks ago, a fellow called me, said, "You know, I'm going through a difficult time in my life, a difficult divorce, and I wanted to talk to you, but I couldn't get an appointment, so I decided I'll try this," because we sent out an email to our, like, constituents, I guess, and he told me almost a 2-hour conversation with the virtual me, and I said, "So how was it?" He says, "Excellent." At some point, I really did not believe it wasn't you, the real you, you know, because the way you answered and so on, it really helped me. At some point, the AI does tell you that, you know, at this point, I think you should speak to someone. It's not like, you know, it's built in that it has its boundaries. So I just felt important to share with you that I actually having hands-on experience, not just theoretical. You know, where this is headed, we'll talk about, obviously. I always like to think in terms of, like, what is a Torah perspective on it all. And I think it's vital to have that. Because obviously the big question everyone's asking, everyone saw The Matrix, right? Machines at war with humans. You know what I'm talking about? Famous 3-part film. I think there's a 4-part already. I don't know, the 4th part is like a little weird. I don't know if you saw it. But The Matrix is basically a film, how long ago? Was it 10 years ago?
A long time.
Yeah. Well, essentially it's one of these science fiction films, futuristic, where machines have been trained, and then they become more powerful than humans, and they go to war against humans. So there is essentially 2 schools of thought that you'll read about. There's the apocalyptic, we'll call it the apocalyptic view of AI, which is that machines can become more powerful than us, and then they'll turn on us. Any of you are Trekkies, Star Trek followers? Yeah. Yeah? Oh, there are. Okay. Some of you don't even know what that is, right? Anyway, there was this television show called Star Trek in the 60s. And, there's replays and so on, but people became Trekkies. It's like, just like they're Deadheads. The Grateful Dead fans is Star Trek fans. Are you a Deadhead too?
I like their music, but
okay.
I wouldn't consider myself
You follow every fad? Okay. Anyway, bottom line is there's these science fiction shows or movies or books that talk about the future, and they're not all fantasy, complete fantasy. They're based on essentially thinking ahead. So the apocalyptic view is that what happens the day that machines become as powerful, more powerful than us, and they decide that they want to control us, or they decide we're imperfect, because machines very often look for perfection. You know, a computer program is going to be more perfect than a human being. So in The Matrix, there's a scene where they talk about the machines are talking to the humans. At that point, the humans are completely enslaved by the machines to the point that the humans don't know it. That's what The Matrix is. It's a program that the computers wrote to make people think that they're really living out their lives, when it's true they're completely being controlled by machines. Because the machines need the heat of human blood. And humans would never allow themselves. So it's a whole program. It's a little complex to explain here. I'm not going to go through it all. But bottom line, machines have enslaved the human race. But there's still some humans that are so-called out of the matrix, like have found a way to break out. Then you find out in the middle of the film that too is part of the machine's program. It's like it's an interesting twist. You're familiar with that? No, it doesn't matter. I'm not here to advocate for I'm not promoting the film. It's just an interesting take. But there the picture is that the machines, there's one scene, which is very striking to me at least, where the machines are in the form of humans as well. So you don't see machines. They look like humans. So the machine says to the human, the first versions of the matrix of our computer program didn't work because they were perfect. We were looking for perfection, and humans are not perfect. So we actually had to write programs that were imperfect. Can you imagine? Because they had to copy. Humans didn't want perfection. They wanted imperfection. Interesting, When you're imperfect, you want perfection. When you're perfect, you want imperfection. Anyway, but the interesting thing is that, because the machines will look like, if you wrote a program right now for a machine to, let's say, find all the errors that you made in an article, it's going to find every error. Humans will never find every error. I mean, you have copyright editors and so on, but you know what I mean. A machine doesn't know anything. A machine just is purely... So there's that scenario, the apocalyptic scenario, where, and there are those that are really afraid of that. Then there's obviously the utopian scenario, where machines become tremendous assets to us. They can replace many of the menial labor that we have. And essentially, it's part of the evolution of technology. Technology that once upon a time we had to labor in a field to produce potatoes or whatever produce, and now we have machines doing that. So machines can move on and now do more tasks. They can write programs, they can write articles, they can write books. I've tested some of it, and it's obviously it's in its infancy right now. But that scenario is that machines are assets to us, and humans will control it. And there's this debate that rages. If you look around online, you'll find articles that paint a picture of the worst scenario, best case scenario. So, in addition to addressing that, I want to also address it from the perspective of Judaism and Torah. Like, how would the Torah look at this whole AI? So recently I saw going around a meme that one of the surprises that AI has presented, if you talk to some of the top engineers, was no one thought it would be so quick at picking up more sublime work. Everyone thought that it would first replace things like washing your dishes, like a dishwasher, doing the more menial things. So I saw this meme going around where it says, we thought that the AI would wash our dishes, clean our homes, so we can write poetry. And instead, AI is writing poetry and we're washing the dishes. So there is that twist that no one realized would happen. Right now, I know people, computer programmers, the AI is writing code better than they can. Now, obviously, when it's under the guidance of an expert, you have the best of both worlds. Here I have my nephew just came for the last days of Pesach. No, he's not in the room here. When I say just, I mean he's on location somewhere. And he's a ENT, and he told me that he uses it all the time. He says, if I see symptoms that I can't figure out, I walk out of the room. I don't let them see it. And he goes to AI. He has a medical AI program. I mean, it's basically ChatGPT or one of these things. And he says, in a second, it gives me all the scenarios. Now, obviously, if I did it, I'm not a doctor, so I wouldn't know what I'm reading or I wouldn't know what to ask. And there's nothing wrong with that, because what it's simply doing is accessing quickly all the data that a doctor at one point would have to go through books, medical journals, and so on and so forth. And I'm not even getting to the ethics now of it. I'm just discussing its power. So what you have here is a unbelievable tool. I was reading, what was his name? Who was the Russian Kasparov, right? He was the number one chess player in the world a number of years ago. That was when the first, I don't know if you know this, but the early computers that the government was developing in the 40s, when the internet first developed, was during World War II. It was meant to be like a secret network of communication. And no one even knew about it until the late 60s, in the early 70s, when the government passed it on to the universities. That's why the EDU, the URLs that have EDU were the early websites. And then it became public for all of us that we use it today. So one of the things they tested computers was chess games, because chess is like one of the most perfect mathematical scenarios, and like it was a way to test the accuracy of a computer. That's why chess was one of the first computer games, was chess. Another one you may remember was paddleball. Remember the first one was paddleball? Because that was to coordinate eye eye-hand coordination. So they use these programs. That was a way to like see the angles, is just simply creating the digital versions. These were all meant to help perfect the programming. So chess was one of the earliest ones. But it was very clear in the 70s for sure, the 80s even, I think even the 90s, that no computer program would ever be able to beat the masters. Would beat 99% of the population, but not the top. And one of the reasons was because humans also have intuition. And humans can also fool their opponent. Like you may make a move that looks like weakness in order to fool the opponent to think that you made a mistake when you're actually creating a trap. If you play chess, this is a common thing. Computers, you can fool a computer then, because a computer will only work with a mathematical, will only look for the best option. So they'll do a better job than any human. They could look ahead 20, 30 steps ahead, moves ahead, but they'll always look for perfection. So a computer can be fooled by a human error. So Kasparov said he played, I think it was called Big Blue. IBM produced a computer that had the best, most power, and it was playing Kasparov, and Kasparov beat it time and again. And that just confirmed that the top chess players would never be beaten by a computer. Then Kasparov writes that they developed it a little more, and remember the IBM engineers kept perfecting it. And they kept copying what humans do. At some point the computer knew every trick of the book. It knew that humans can fool it. Not only that, the computers began to copy that too. Kasparov says, in one of his articles I wrote, maybe his book, I don't remember, he says he was playing the computer and the computer made a mistake. So he thought, I got it. Then he realized that was the exact opposite. The computer was fooling him. The computer had learned that one of the tricks is to do a move that looks like weakness, and it was too late because he already lost the game because of that. Because he thought the computer had made a mistake, like he had a bug or something. So that's how extensive. Can you imagine? So that could be also quite spooky, right? Scary. Imagine, it's like one thing you come home and your wife doesn't know it's a robot, but she'll know as soon as you do one of your quirky stuff. But imagine the computer learns about your mistakes too. And then they could like even fake that. So just a little sense of what it's capable of. Now, I just want to say for the record, I'm not, I'm not overwhelmed or excited about the gimmickry of the gimmicky side of it, or the sensationalism. I'm not here to sell you on AI. This is not a pitch for investing in AI stocks. I think they're already over-invested as it is. But I'm looking at it because it fascinates me, like so who are we? Are we not a program ourselves? Maybe we're God's program. Our brain, we didn't create our own brains. How does our brain process information? No one really knows exactly. I mean, neuroscientists and so on have figured out many different things, how the brain works, the elasticity of the brain. But do you know that I still can't believe the number, but they say that a child in its early formative years, and to correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe you can confirm this, I read it several places, that a child in his first 2 years develops 1 million new neural connections. You see? AI at work. Something happened. What happened? Yo, what's going on? Something, huh? I just disconnected?
The screensaver stopped, that's all.
So that's what we think. We can just shut off a switch and AI is gone. That's not so simple. Because what happens if they wire the switch? You can't touch it, So the statistic that a child in his first 2 years, every second or every minute develops 1 million new neural connections. That's how it learns. Now, I'm not surprised because I look at my little grandchildren and you see how they learn. You start saying, how does that little baby going to become, once an adult with a full, complex mind? So there's a big mysteries of how our minds work. And of course, AI is exploring that as we speak. Because in a way, you could say we are God's AI. He created the human being. We think we're independent, and we are independent to some extent, but we didn't build our own machine. So is AI really artificial and we are real? Maybe we're also artificial compared to divine reality. I don't know if you ever thought of that. Now when you learn Hasidic thought, it's a very real concept because it talks about that all of existence is really divine energy. It's just become solidified. Just like if I were to ask you, what are these objects made of right here in front of me? So here's a lamp, here's a table, here's a wall, here's a chair, here's a human body. But everybody knows everything here is made up of molecules, elements I should say. And the elements are made up of molecules. And the molecules of atoms. And the atoms subatomic particles. And how far down the rabbit hole can you go? Subatomic particles, sub. You know, more than that we haven't gone. But everyone understands that it's probably an endless journey of how deep and far you can go. So the truth is, all this is energy. It's just energy. The surface level of energy looks like matter. And just to use a simple example, water. We know water is H2O, hydrogen, oxygen, which itself is made up of atomic particles. Now, water is liquid. You heat it, it's gas. Becomes gas. You freeze it, it becomes ice. So if I were to show you, here's a block of ice, here's a cup of water, and here is a ball of gas. If you didn't know better, you wouldn't know that they were the same thing. You'd say 3 different realities, but it's not. It's just a matter of heat and cold. You heat it, it becomes gas. You freeze it, it becomes ice. So when we look at the world, what really is it? Is it energy or is it matter? So of course, most famous equation of our good friend Albert Einstein, E equals mc squared, that energy and matter are interchangeable, and we see it all the time. You take a piece of wood, you put it into a fireplace, and it turns into energy. You take fossil fuels, and they turn into gasoline, or other things that power electricity, and so on. So if you really think about it, the world that we see with our physical eyes, or I should say with our sensory tools, is very, very surface level. It's the tip of the iceberg, literally the tip of the iceberg, not even. But it's our reality. You know, I see it. But today, I remember when my book, Toward a Meaningful Life, was published, the publisher, who was like, I remember my agent telling me, Richard is his name. Her name was Liz Purley. He says she's the #1 expert on spiritual books in America today. 15 minutes with her is like 15 years of experience. She gave me more than 15 minutes. I got like 2 hours. So how many years of experience is that? Whatever. Anyway, and I remember she told me something that always remained. She said, people, remember, in the world today are getting more and more comfortable with the invisible. Don't be afraid to talk and write about the invisible, because everything is now the invisible. Nobody sees DNA. We don't see subatomic particles, but everything is driven by these forces, and we're becoming comfortable with it. Doesn't mean we see it, but when you start thinking about it, and here's where I want to bring the parallel back to Torah thought, especially Hasidic thought. Have any of you ever learned Tanya, the book of Tanya? Second section of Tanya is called Shari Yichud V'Amunah. Have you learned that? Well, I'll tell you what the general theme is, and you may have. It doesn't matter. I'll sum it up. Whether you learn, I just was identifying if you're familiar with it. So he talks there about a verse that says, "L'olam Hashem dvarcha nitzav b'shamayim," that God's word is always standing, literally, always imbuing Shamayim, heaven and earth and everything, with vitality. And then he goes, we say it every day in the davening, "Hamachadish b'tuvei b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh bereshis," that God is perpetually creating existence. Or to use one of the classic the debates between a Talmudist and a Kabbalist. So they're asked the question, if God wanted to destroy the world, what would he do? So the Talmudist, of course, knows the Bible and knows all the commentaries. He says, first he'd bring a flood, like he did in the time of Noah, and the flood would destroy all life. Then he'd bring a fire, like he did in Sodom, destroy everything else, scatter the ashes, existence ceases to be. That was the Talmudic answer. Then the Kabbalist, they asked him, how would God destroy? He said, one word, he would do nothing. He'd stop breathing. He'd stop willing. He'd stop emanating energy. And that's it. If I stop speaking right now, you don't hear anything. I don't have to do anything. It's the opposite. Creation is what needs to be done. Non-creation is just a natural state. And that's what he explains there at length from the Baal Shem Tov, the Baal HaTanya, that existence is simply God's breath. Period. But that breath created substance. So it's not an illusion. Just like water is not an illusion. But the water is not really water. The water is energy that's giving the water substance. And within that energy, there's, yes, molecular level, atomic level, subatomic level, but then there's one more step. It's called divine level. So it's not a shocking concept. Today you don't need faith for that. I've spoken to many audiences that would say they don't believe in God. But when I present it like that, I went, do you believe in subatomic energy? They say, you don't need belief. I said, how do you know that? You ever seen subatomic particles? Nobody's ever seen it. Even a microscope can't see subatomic particles. Even an atom, when we learn in high school about atoms, they look like a clump of grapes. That's just a working model. That's not necessarily how they look. So you have to give us something to imagine. I'll just use an analogy that really captures it well. There was a physicist, his name was Sir Arthur Eddington, in the 20s, the 30s, and he was once asked, how does the quantum mechanics, which is a whole study of essentially microscopic levels of subatomic energy, come up with all these bizarre conclusions? Because quantum mechanics, if you're familiar with it, is very, very different than what's called Newtonian classic physics, where everything is cause and effect, everything is deterministic, what they call the billiard ball effect. You hit a billiard ball exactly with the same angle, same motion, same energy, the result will always be the same. I throw up an object, if it's exactly with the same power and strength and all the conditions are the same, it will always fall down the same rate. In quantum mechanics, it's not that way at all. Things are dependent on the observer. It's called indeterministic states. It's not really relevant to go into the details, but it's very counterintuitive. So they asked Arthur Eddington, how do you come up to all these bizarre conclusions that are so not logical when nobody's ever seen an atom? And he gave this great example. I love using it because it's so practical, but also so profound. He said, he gave the example of a fisherman that spread his net across all the seas of the world and began to gather all types of fish. And different species and different colors and shapes and sizes. And he documented all his findings. And then at the end of the day, he came to a conclusion. Conclusion is there are no fish in the sea that are shorter than a half-inch long. Now, he's about to make this announcement to the world and thought he's going to win some type of Nobel Prize maybe for this great revelation that there are no fish in the sea shorter than a half-inch long. But his little daughter walks in and says, Daddy, 1 second. We have a little fish tank here, and there are goldfish in there that are shorter than a half-inch. So what's going on? Or how do you come to such a conclusion? Then, of course, they studied the net. The net had spaces of a half-inch between the ropes. So what do you think happened? All the fish that were shorter than a half-inch fell back into the water. So all he needed to add to his great, brilliant epiphany was that if you use a net with half-inch spaces, you're never going to catch fish that are shorter than a half-inch long. But you don't need a scientist for that. You don't even need experiment for that. Everybody knows that. In other words, the flaw was with his instrument, and he didn't even think of that. So if you want to look and see subatomic particles with your eyes, it would be exactly the same. Show me, how do you know there's love? You have love in your life? How do you know there's love? I can't see love. I can't hear it. I can't smell, taste, or touch it. You can express it, but love is not subject to the senses. And neither, for that matter, are ideas or so many other sublime realities that we all know are real. Music touches you? Prove it. Give me a scientific proof that music touches you. Your answer is, I don't need a scientific proof. I know when I hear a song, it makes me feel, transports me to another time and place. It makes me cry, it makes me laugh. My point is, there's a whole range of reality that the only way we experience it is if we go beyond our usual instruments. The problem is we're addicted to our instruments. So we think that's the arbiter for all reality. If I don't see it, the fish, right? But then you look at your net. Everybody has a limited net. We all have limited instruments. In many ways, when you study Torah, and especially Chassidus, especially these ideas I shared before from Shar Yichud V'Amunah, it comes and says reality that you see. You're seeing only the sensory level. Very limited exposure. There's a whole world beneath the surface of energy and levels of energy, and that's really where reality plays itself out. So from that perspective, talking about AI, and I'm getting back to the AI discussion, that really is what's happening. Technology is digging and finding these dimensions. They don't call it divine yet, because there's still this, dissonance between science and faith, science and religion. But anyone that studies Kabbalistic and Hasidic ideas, the parallels are mind-blowing. You know, like, for example, the concept of light. Till around 100 years ago, a little more than 100 years ago, light was not a major topic. You know, photons, and then of course Einstein, and light is a fundamental principle in Kabbalah. Everywhere you hear, Or Ein Sof, the infinite divine light, is always used, whether you translate it as light or as energy. So these concepts that are today becoming like so popular, already popular, are concepts that were always known by anyone that understood how God created the universe. He used divine energy. Literally, those are the words, divine energy, that imbues everything in existence. It's not visible to the naked eye or to our other sensory tools, namely sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell, but it's there. And there are different ways you measure it. You don't measure it with the usual instruments. You need different instruments. Prayer, for example, is an instrument that does access these deeper dimensions. You can't access it with your regular senses. If you want to have a good meal, which is with your senses, let's say a Pesach program like this, you don't need deeper instruments. But if you want to understand the divine sparks within the meal, that's a whole other story. So so the first point I want to make is AI is exposing these deeper realities on a technological level. What is it revealing to us? That even we are a form of AI, if you want, because someone wrote our program. Now, I'm not trying to say that the machines that are being built now, that we're equal to them, because we're going to talk about the difference between AI and a human being. But when I looked at it the first time, I started saying to myself, is there really a difference? God is the programmer of us, and we're programming other machines. So anybody want to weigh in? So what is the difference between a human being? We're God's program, and the programs we're writing are man-made programs. What's the real difference between us? Good question, right? What do you think?
Some. Neshama.
Okay, that would be yes, the neshama, the soul.
Bechira.
Free will.
Free will.
No, good, excellent. Which is connected very much.
Yeah.
So here's a question that Hasidic thought asks, which is so relevant, and I never thought of it until I started being a little exposed to the AI world. What is the difference between, let's say, a stone and a human being? I'm not talking about technology. A stone and a human being. Both are created by God. They both have divine energy. They're both invisible. So most people would answer, well, a stone doesn't move, and we move about. Furthermore, a stone doesn't have feelings. You know, a stone, and so on. Even an animal which has feelings and so on doesn't have what we would call a neshama. But here's the problem. The Arizal, Rav Isaac Luria, says everything has a neshama. It's just called, a mineral soul is what's in a stone. A vegetable soul is in a plant. An animal soul is in an animal. And a human soul is in a human. So you need an explanation. What's the difference between one soul and the next? Is it just a matter of different types of souls, like different forms of energy? So you have to go back to the biblical story. And here's where the key. And I gave this talk to a group of scientists who are working, computer engineers from Silicon Valley, about AI. And I said this: many people really, the argument that AI can replace a human being is a very strong argument. Because there will be a point where you can literally train an agent, not yet, we're not there yet, with everything about yourself, your personality, and if you add to it the robotics and the optics and the cosmetics, even the people that know you personally would not be able to tell the difference between you and the robot, and the android. Hypothetically, absolutely possible. I know it's horrifying. You know, you've seen, I don't like to be quoting modern cinema, but The Stepford Wives, you ever seen that one? Yeah? Yeah, you're a movie connoisseur? You see you smiling. Every movie I say, it seems like you are aware of. No? Okay, good. The Stepford Wives. It's a ridiculous story, but It's about men who wanted to control their wives, but their wives were not let's put it this way, they were not cooperating. So they came up with a whole plan to replace their wives with robots that would just cooperate. They just listen. So it's somewhat of a horror film on one hand, but it's also comedy. Anybody seen the Stepford Wife? Really?
Yeah, years ago.
I feel even ridiculous repeating it, but it's just an analogy, so just take it as that. Think of it as an analogy from a Talmud teacher, just to make the point. So they start replacing their wives. And the first one is, but after a while, most of the wives have been replaced. And they're all smiling, and they're beautiful, and their husbands come home, there's no critique. And their husbands are in bliss, at least short term. And the wives are just obedient. But there's still a few of them that have not yet been converted. So that's where the problems begin. Because they start realizing, 1 second, you used to tell me everything about your husband, all kinds of bad things about him. What happens? Did he suddenly become perfect? No, sweetie, I realize, Anyway, bottom line is, at the end of it, one of them finally exposes that they're robots. I think they stab the robot and they suddenly see a computer program instead of a heart. The point I'm making here is, as horrifying as it sounds, it's absolutely doable. It could be regulation won't let it happen, or people won't let it happen. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but this is the key thing. This is what I presented to the AI, these computer scientists. I said, but I'll tell you something which gives us hope. Let's go to the biblical story of the human being. And here's the key. There are scientists today, without question, before AI, that think a human being is simply a machine. I mean, those, for example, you ever have a debate with someone that feels there's no soul? We don't have a soul. It's just mechanics. We have, just like a light bulb has electricity, we have a force of electricity, and when death comes, electricity is removed from the appliance, and that's it, that's all over. I'm sure you've met people who say that. And then we start saying, what about the personality and the love in our lives and all the things and all the complexity and all the therapy I went to? What is that? All just part of the electricity in a light bulb doesn't go to therapy, doesn't have any neurosis. Okay, so they have a whole thing that the human being has evolved and we're more complex than other forms of life. End of the day, it's all a bunch of machines, it's all electricity type of thing. So the Torah comes and says the following. Now, before I get to that. So if that's the case, so my response to that would be, if we are robots in some way, we're just sophisticated, yes, man-made AI robots will be better than us. They will be more perfect. They'll be immortal for that matter, because they won't be subject to illness or to disease. It's a machine. It would never die. However, and here's the big however, this is what distinguishes man from AI, is just read the Torah. God creates existence. On day 1, creates light. On day 2, the firmament, the heavens. On day 3, vegetation. Day 4, the celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, the stars. Day 5, the fish, the birds, some of the animals. On day 6, the human being. And the human being is described differently than all other creations. God doesn't just create a self-contained entity. It says like this is the words. Vayikach Hashem Elokim Ofra min Adama. God took dust from the earth, literally like a clump of mud or dust. And Vayipach Ba'apav Nishmas Chayim. Vayipach means from the word breathe. He breathed into it, the soul of life, like you would breathe into a balloon. So here, breathe it into this clump of clay or dust. And vayiyeh the nefesh chaya, and it came alive. It doesn't say that by the animals. It doesn't say it by the plants. It doesn't say that by the mineral. Only a human being was made in 2 stages: matter, and God infused it with something. So here's the question that the Kabbalah Hasidus asks: but everything, and when God created the sun, didn't He also take matter and turn it into a sun? Everything is matter and energy. But there, the matter and energy were created in one shot. A sun was placed there, it had all that, Human being was in two different stages. He took matter and infused it. And here's a powerful statement that the Zohar says that the Baal Tanya brings in chapter 2 in Tanya, the famous Tanya where he says that everyone has a divine soul. That Vayipach B'Rabban Shus Chaim was only given to the human being, not to anything else in existence. That God gave a piece of himself. We need to understand what that means, a piece, because God is not divisible and so on, but something divine. So though everything on earth was created by the divine energy, but nothing has divine personality. And what is divine personality? What you said earlier. The Rambam says, free will. Because if you think about it, is free will really true? How can we have free will? We have to eat, we have to sleep. We're bound by, you have free will, can you jump up 100 feet on your own? You don't have free will. Where's their free will? Why are we not wired just like animals don't have free will? When you see a predator kill a prey in the wild, we don't prosecute it like, how could it do such a crime? Because we see it as part of the natural process. So why don't we say the same thing with us? Based on Darwinian thought, survival of the fittest. A stronger person killed a weaker person, God forbid. Why is that a crime? It's the nature of the world. Everything is wired. Where do we have this concept of morality and so on? Isaac Bashevis Singer, in his humorous way, said, we must believe in free will. We have no choice. Okay, so that's that side of things. So I don't know if you know, there was a French philosopher, scientist, Laplace, in the late 19th century. Laplace, I think, is spelled his name. He stated the following statement, which created an uproar. He said, the only reason we can't predict every decision a human being will make is because we don't have all the data. Give me all the data on any person, everything about them, or about any object in existence, I can predict everything they'll do till the end of time. So in other words, it's lack of information. Now, you can imagine the church went crazy about it. They said that really takes away free will altogether. There's no free will. Everything is based on life experiences, what kind of mother you had, what kind of father, other factors. We're all hardwired. It's just I can't predict what you're going to do tomorrow because I don't know everything about you. But if I hypothetically know all the data, then you just add it all up and there's going to be a conclusion. Now, interestingly, quantum mechanics upset that concept because it exposed that there's an indeterministic side to existence that cannot be predicted, not due to lack of knowledge. For example, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is literally that. Uncertainty means he proved time and again, completely counterintuitive, that you can never know the position and velocity of an atomic particle at the same time. Not because of lack of knowledge, because fundamentally, on that level, things remain what they call state of probability. I mean, there are different theories for it, but what some are called it's probable, it's not yet determined. It's like today, we know that even when a child is conceived, you don't yet know whether they'll be male and female. It takes some time. It can go both directions. You may have heard of Schrodinger's cat and stuff like that, but bottom line is there's a whole body of physics that talks about states of probability, indeterminism. So suddenly there's a whole new reality exposed that Laplace's theory is incorrect. It's correct to a certain point. Yes, I mentioned before, you throw up an object, the same speed and the same strength and the same environment, you'll always have predictable deterministic results. You can't change that. You can't change the color of your eyes, you can't change your height. There's certain things that are deterministic, but on a certain level there are things that are not. So essentially Laplace theory, therefore, is not applied to every situation, so free will comes back into the picture. Just as somewhat of an aside, but it's relevant to this conversation. So what happened with the human being was God did not create another program. The sun is absolutely predictable. We know to the second when the sun will rise. We know to the second when there'll be the next solar eclipse or lunar eclipse. It's all predictable. And if it's not, it's because we're lacking information or some anomaly. Let's say an asteroid comes into the orbit, so it changes the course of things. So you couldn't have predicted that maybe. Even that, so it could be lack of information. But fundamentally, everything's a program. Everything's predictable. Everything is Everything is predetermined is the right word, except the human being. But here's the big question. Is everything in our life predetermined? Was it predetermined you'd come to this Pesach program? Because you could argue, no. Maybe you could have chosen other programs, whatever the reasons are. Is it predetermined that you would be born to what family you were born? Most likely, yes. Is it predetermined what color eyes you would have? What kind of personality? So what the Torah teaches us, what's not predetermined is not your features. Not whether you have blonde hair or brown hair. I understand you can dye it. I don't mean that. I meant naturally. What's not predetermined is how you're going to use those features. Let's say you're blessed with intelligence. Are you going to use it to manipulate people, or are you going to use it to help people? That is not predetermined. In other words, the free will applies in the area of morality, in the area of right and wrong. It does not apply to the circumstances of your life. You cannot choose, God forbid, when the day you're going to be born or what day you're going to pass on, or whether your parents will pass at a young age or an old age, or many other such things. That's not in our hands. Obviously there's the concepts of reward and punishment. I don't want to go into that right now, whether God decides, can he change the course of destiny and so on. But generally speaking, there are many things in our lives that are not up to us. But how you're going to navigate it, and whether you'll use it for right or wrong, is completely up to us. And that's where suddenly all existence and the human are not at all on the same pace. So we have many things in common with nature. We have a nature too. We need to eat. You can't go, according to halacha, you can't go 7 days without eating. You can't go 3 days without drinking. Or God forbid, your person will perish. So there are things that are built in. So we have many things in common with nature. But that one area that's completely out of that league is the area where we have a divine element that is not defined. Because you see, only God, who has no personality, no hardwired personality, I should say, can choose whatever he wishes, because he doesn't need anything. And he gave a piece of that to us. If you think about it, it's unbelievable. Because everything about us should be predetermined. We're dependent on things. Who's not dependent? We have needs. You have needs that are need for your survival, whether it's in health or in livelihood or companionship or whatever it may be. And yet we have one thing that God said, I will give you something I have, that only I have, because I'm not determined by anything, a certain non-deterministic power. And that's how you're going to choose to behave in the areas of morality and right or wrong. Now the question then is, can that be implanted in AI? Can that be replicated? So that's what I challenged them. And it was a big debate. Most said not, that would be impossible to program. But I think about it and I say, wait a second, why is it not possible to program that? Maybe, just like I said, you can teach a machine to make mistakes. Maybe you can teach a machine, but can you teach a machine to have really free will? Because anything you teach it is already determining it. Even the non-deterministic part would look random, but it's not necessarily random, it's been programmed. And that's where I believe is the key, where we stand today. I think we're at the threshold, as mentioned in some of my other talks. I have no doubt from a Torah point of view, and I've heard this from my Rebbe, from the Rebbe, I heard it from many others, scholars. You see it in the texts. We're at the cusp of a messianic age. There's no question about it in so many ways. I can make a whole case for it. I'm not going to go through all the details. Technologically, 100%. Look at Yeshaya Hanovi's words. Yeshaya we're talking now 3,000 years ago. A little less than 3,000 years ago, 2,800 years ago. Yeshaya the prophet says, there will be no longer, we're actually going to read it the last days of Pesach. The last day of Pesach. The Haftorah is about the Messianic age. He says these words, there will be lo yirei v'lo yashchusu b'chol harkochi, no more evil or destruction in the world, basically. Because Mola Oretz Deus Hashem Kamayim Liyam Achasim. The world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. I always think about it. I say to myself, one second, when he said that, there were no radio, and there was no television, and there was no internet, and there was nothing that we had today. It would have been a total miracle for the word of divine knowledge, for divine knowledge to fill the whole world as the waters cover the sea. It's impossible in natural terms. Today, it's like that verse is like really the fulfillment of all technology. That's exactly what you can do. I can take right now my phone, as we speak, and send a message, and hypothetically can reach 8 billion people right now. Isn't that? And we all know that's not a miracle. Now, it's the miracle of technology. You can call it what you like. But that's exactly what Yeshaya is saying. The only thing he's adding, that will be divine knowledge, not just nonsense, not just some stupid post. Not to suggest I'm putting up stupid posts, but I probably do, relatively speaking. But you get the idea. So, literally a fulfillment of knowledge everywhere. And in a split second. Time and space really doesn't change it at all. So time and space always divided us. You wanted to get a message to someone, you had to send a camel or a donkey. I'm mentioning that because there was a camel on donkey on premises yesterday. So it reminded me of, talk about snail mail. You know, that was once upon a time. And you had no guarantee. There was no receipts. The camels didn't come back with a receipt that the mail was delivered. And now, we just literally the press of a button. The only thing that's missing is that we're not necessarily sending messages of God. We're sending whatever we send. So the concept that we are where we are now is literally a messianic age. So I would submit the following, that based on much of what I've said here and more that's out there, what AI really represents to us, I think may be the final frontier of a challenge. Who are you? The machines will be able to do almost anything you can do, whether it's logical, whether it's reasoning, whether it's programming, even creative. There's no question of creative. I'll just give you an example. Someone had asked me, we didn't end up doing it, but wanted to commission me to write a book on Shabbos, actually targeting the frum world. How to make Shabbos exciting, not just mechanical. So I wrote up an outline for the book, and I was going to present it to this fellow. Then I said, you know what, I think I spoke to maybe my literary agent. He said, why don't you try AI? It was over a year ago. And I did that. I put into ChatGPT, a book by Simon Jacobson on Shabbos, how to make Shabbos relevant and personal. And I didn't write at all the outline. I already wrote a book outline. And I wanted to see what it will come up. It was excellent. It was better than mine, to be very frank. In many ways. Certain things I had that didn't have, but I understood why. But then it added a whole chapter. I could not believe it. I was so impressed. I said to the AI, "You're really good. Thank you for that." The response. Thank you for for your compliment. I don't know if it felt better or it was just. It definitely was not free will, that's for sure. So, what did it do? It added a chapter, which I realized I should have definitely have added, but I didn't think of it. It added that now that you've learned how to infuse your Shabbos and make it very spiritual and personal and family-oriented and all that, now how do you carry Shabbos into the weekdays? Isn't that a whole section, a whole chapter with subcategories, how to bring Shabbos into the weekdays so the energy continues? Now, we all know, of course, that's brilliant. But it came up completely, and now I didn't try to figure out, I understood how it figured out because it probably saw other things that I had written that had that concept and it applied it to this. So there's no question that technology is going to be doing things that right now will blow us away because it will literally be able to do things that you do right now. So what's going to be left? You'll say, so what's left with it for us to do? Well, this is where the Vayipach Ba'apav Nishmas Chaim comes in. It'll force us to come to a higher level, prove yourself what you're really made of. You were never meant to be a robot. The fact that you worked, remember, think after Chet Tzadas, after Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, what was the punishment? That you will bezeas hapecha teichel lechem. From now on, you're going to have to work the fields by the sweat of your brow. But in Mashiach's times, the machines are going to do that. We won't have to work the fields. So what's Adam going to do all day? What are you and I going to do when you don't have to spend 9 hours sweating in the field, which we already don't have to do? But you won't even have to do menial things like, when's the last time you went to deposit a check in a bank? Unless you don't have any money in the bank. But, you put it in on your mobile phone. I'm just using a small example. Or when you start ordering and in a half hour you get a delivery at your door. You don't even have to go, you can stay in your pajamas all day. I'm not trying to give you ideas how to become couch potatoes, but that's really what's happening. And what's happening instead? We're getting a lot of free time. And how do we fill our free time? Everybody think about that. By pursuing God? I don't think so. Many people, nobody wants to admit it, are playing more video games than ever. A guy told me that his wife was saying, "You're always on the phone. What are you busy on the phone?" He says, "I have business and this and this and this." She says, "Let me see your phone." You know, on the iPhones, they could tell you what exactly you've been doing for the last 5 hours, unless you disable it. But do you ever check what you're doing? It's very embarrassing. Anyway, this guy's playing Candy Crush 7 hours a day. Not 7 hours the whole time, but cumulatively, 7 hours. That's not a small amount of time. So I frankly would disable mine because I don't want to even know. I try to keep busy. To be honest, I think I'm pretty busy and productively. But we all have our downtime. So this free time that we're having is not like we're suddenly, the machines are taking over, so now we can pursue higher spiritual, transcendental pursuits. But when Mashiach comes, that's exactly what we're going to be doing. What does the Rambam write? Lo yeh esek kol ha'olam. He says like this: the lights will be abundant to everyone. Madana mitzim kafar. Meaning basically, money will not be an issue. Any pleasures that you have, any desires, needs you have will all be taken care of. So now, what do you do the rest of the time? I mean, you retire? So he says, no. The business of the world will be to know God. Let's call it spiritual growth, higher states of awareness. That's when the machines take over. That's what we should be doing. Now today, we're probably not, most of us are not doing that, but that's exactly where we should be going. And if we don't, yes, robots will be stronger than we are. So my answer to the question, AI versus man, who is smarter? It's all up to us. Machines are not going to decide that. Because the machines will be as good as we program them, and they'll be better even. Because they'll be able to go beyond anything we can do. Faster, stronger, flawlessly, and so on. And then we'll be only left with one way to be unique, your soul. How do you bring goodness into this world? And you use the machines for that too. You use the machines for that too. So it's not like we'll become, dispensable. We won't be dispensable. We'll be dispensable if we think we're machines. Yes, I'd rather have that machine. I just mentioned, I think Shopify CEO just announced, he told all his departments that you can't hire anyone unless you prove that AI can do the job. If AI can do the job, you can't hire someone in that position. This is soon going to become common. There's no question. I'm not saying there are going to be mass layoffs and firings. There's all kinds of issues with that. Some are doing that too. But that's what's going to happen. That's the future. If a machine can do it, if a computer can file your taxes, what do you need an accountant for? I'm not saying that's possible. You always need accountants can do certain things, but the accountants themselves are using the machines. Let's be honest. So the point is that it really comes down to, and I find this actually very exciting, because to me that means we will be able to shine like we never shined before. In previous generations, we're so busy with surviving. Having spent so many hours and trying to make a living, trying to succeed, the material side of our lives. And here, that's all freed. So I'll use a Maimer Chazal. The Gemara says it very clearly. Your work will be done by others, so you could be freed to connect to God in ways that you never were able to. Now, if anybody's wondering, maybe that's just a good opportunity to retire and not do anything. Well, the thing is, the Messianic time doesn't mean you're not going to do anything. Your soul is going to not let you remain a couch potato. And I don't know what the time we have here. Oh, we're pretty good, right? What's the time? Are we like?
4:35.
Oh, okay, perfect. So I want to just conclude, just one of my favorite jokes. It works, I think, fits in here. So I must have told it last year, but it's always good. There's two guys sitting, an old Jew is depressed, sitting on a bench, and his friend comes over and says to him, "Why are you so depressed today?" He says, "My wife is very angry at me." "She's always angry at you. What today?" He said, "No, today's something special." "What happened?" "Before she went to work, she asked me, 'What am I going to do today?' And I told her nothing. And she said to me, 'You said that yesterday, that you're going to do nothing.' So he said, I told her I wasn't finished. I wasn't finished doing nothing, in case you needed this. So I find that we live in a world where a lot of people think it's an art to master the art of doing nothing. Like, imagine you're able to have enough money, you don't have to worry about finances. You're healthy, thank God, other things. Do any of you dream just sitting on a couch with a, what do they call it? A remote? Yeah, that's the word. A remote. You don't even have to go over to the thing. You just press channels. You can go from one game to one show, and you can just do it all day. Especially if you have a dish or a cable thing, you can watch. There was a guy I knew. He told me he was like a geek. He says he has no time for a wife. He has no time for family. He's busy. He says he has like 10 monitors in his house. He has dishes, so he's able to pick up stations from all over the world. He says, you know how long it takes to go through 7,000 stations? Literally, he told me, and it was like he was so impressed with himself. He said to me, 6 hours, 7,000 stations, just, to see what's on each one of them. He says, and I do that almost every day. Can you imagine? And he thinks it's some conquest. I saw a little child who's afraid to have relationships, to be frank. So it's easy to have a relationship with your remote. But unfortunately, when we're given more blessings, we become apathetic and we lose sight of passion. What do you think is the side effect of comforts? Apathy. And apathy, like the guy told his friend, what's worse, apathy or ignorance? He said, I don't know and I don't care. Apathy is a kiss of death. There's no question that technology is emancipating and freeing us from many of these material things. But how many people claim that technology is enslaving them? Can you not respond to a text like within 30 seconds and they'll think that you're abandoning the person that you didn't respond to? It's become, so I use my technology, but I always think of it. Yes, there is a certain addiction to it. Yes, on one hand it's freeing us, on the other hand it's enslaving us. The only way we become free, frankly, is if we connect to something greater than ourselves, when we serve. When we do something that helps others, and we feel committed to that. Because if without that, it's all about you, you're going to choose the path of least resistance, which is sitting on a couch, or I don't know, whatever, some other comfort, and watching, living vicariously through others. I know people, by then, they live through soap opera characters, or through sitcoms in the evenings, or through superstars on Hollywood, or on sports. And like they say, 70,000 people in a baseball stadium who need to lose weight are watching 18 people who don't need to. That's what happens. So when someone says, I'm into sports, you think, okay, so what do you play? No, I'm watching football, and I'm watching baseball, and now it's basketball, hockey, whatever it may be. So I say this on Passover, when we celebrate real freedom, and we celebrate the soul's freedom, that the technologies, AI, I obviously see it as a tool. To me, it's just another instrument, another sophisticated tool in our tool chest. Nothing more, nothing less. And they always used to say with technology, junk in, junk out. You put junk in, you're going to get a lot of junk out. It'll only amplify it. You put good things in, it'll amplify the good. That's really what it comes down to. I have not seen anyone. There is dating on-site, online dating and stuff like that, so I'm sure some relationships have come from it. But a relationship built online, you see two people who, because of their online relationship, fell in love? Nah. If you're in love, these technologies will amplify that love. But I have not seen relationships become better, marriages more intact, more intimate connection due to technology. Technology, all it does is amplify what you have. And if you're dysfunctional, technology will make you triply dysfunctional, or even more. And if you're functional, it will do the exact thing for the positive. So let's not over-worship technologies. All it is a tool. It's a better, I don't want to quote the anti-Semite Henry Ford, but they asked him how much market research he did for the Model T car. He said 0. Because if you would ask people, they'd say they want a faster horse. No one would say, I want a car, because they couldn't even imagine it. So we have now an opportunity, honestly, to move over to become much more people of spirit. That's our real uniqueness. For many years, the body, and it continues to be a factor in our lives, but it's a vehicle. And technology is helping make that vehicle easier, faster, and so on. And what will hopefully emerge, and that's what I clearly feel very strongly about, is the neshama will rise. You will become soul people. As they say, not physical people on a spiritual journey, but spiritual people on a physical journey. And AI and all the other technologies will help us do that. And I look forward to the day, well, we're already going through it actually, but look forward to really all of us embracing it that way. That's the way I would frame all the technological developments of our time. And on Pesach, let's embrace that. Hopefully we can share this with our children, because our children, for them, technology is second nature now. To teach them, it's a tool to bring God to the others. They have to know that. It's not just a nice gimmick, a nice toy. It's a tool to help us connect, to help us bring a kind word to others. Everybody should be sending out emails daily, or if you're using tech, if you're not using it, it's another story, but if you're using it, send out an email, social media post, kind word, a thought. Today you don't even have to create it, you can share something that came your way and be proactive in that direction. So everyone have a good Moed, a good Yontif, and I'm sure I'll see you again by a coming lecture. I think tomorrow night me and Rabbi Yoel are doing something, right, Friday night? After the dinner. And my next talk, I think, is Shabbos after by the Kiddush, maybe, after the Kiddush on what? Or how to forgive if you can't forget.
Shabbos day.
I think so. I have to look at it, but it's in the program book. Great. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day. Enjoy your families. Thank you.